Hello, everybody. I am Chris Lee of Vandy Sports, joined by Billy Derrick as we do a special live edition of the podcast here on Wednesday morning. SEC tournament tonight. We've got coaching situations to discuss. We have got baseball to discuss. Lots of things in the air this morning. We just made it a very impromptu decision to go live. So, and who knows the way the world works these days. By the time you see this, if you're not watching it live, it could be out of date. It could be out of date by the time we're done with it and you're watching it live. We don't know. That's the world we live in these days. But the podcast is presented to you by our friends at Anchor Impact, Commodore Nation. Get closer to Vanderbilt athletics than ever before with Anchor Impact, the official NIL collective for Vanderbilt University. Gain access to unmatched exclusive coverage, be part of a one-of-a-kind community as an Anchor Impact member. You gain exclusive privileges and benefits, offering deeper engagement with student-athletes, coaches, staff, and the entire Vanderbilt community. Access behind-the-scenes content, exclusive events, unique merchandise, and personalized experience, creating an unparalleled connection with the student-athlete's journey. You can also become a catalyst for change, redefining the landscape of college athletics and showcasing the potential impact of NIL on student-athletes' lives. Join the mission of Anchor Impact to support student-athletes and elevate Vanderbilt athletics to new heights. Become a member today. Be part of this impactful journey. Help the Commodores thrive. Contribute now by logging into anchorimpact.com/register. Billy, are we sure we're live here?
We are.
Okay,
we
good.
Are live.
I just wasn't sure on my screen.
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have some people popping in the chat here in a bit, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Podcast also brought to you by the Wash House, which has sponsored basketball season. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time from the things you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Drop off your dirty laundry. Our professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, clean laundry ready to be put away. Check them out at washhouseclean.com. Stop in today. Get your time back. We are also presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Studio. They present baseball season. It's a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro, a partnership that began 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, more with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at mpmci.com. When Lent is done with, I'll be having plenty of ice cream and plenty of Purity. So thanks to them and the Wash House and Anchor Impact for sponsorship of this show. Billy, anything in the air around Vanderbilt athletics this morning? It has been a crazy time. I say that jokingly. We have covered baseball. I think the coaching thing is on everybody's mind. We're headed to the SEC tournament tonight. Billy and I will be on press row along with Joey, covering that and the press conference afterwards, and just what a wild time we're in the middle of.
It's crazy, Chris. And this season has been it's had a little bit of everything. We started this basketball season with a loss to Presbyterian, and you at that point there was still reason to say, okay, Vanderbilt can and might turn this around. We've seen that in the Jerry Stackhouse era. But this season, they never truly responded. And I'd mentioned this to Joey in our rapid reaction after Saturday's game and win. With the Lee Dort situation and the Colin Smith injury, it just felt like this team was overwhelmed by both of those and some transfers not panning out and, a lot of turnover. It just kind of all combined into not a great season. I know they got to 4 wins, and that was actually what I predicted. I just felt like that was the ceiling for this team heading into SEC play where they were at. And so Chris, we're sitting here with a game against Arkansas. Can they win? Yeah. And I think they might. I mean, this
They've
is a
beaten
team.
Arkansas 3 times in a row now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something in the water whenever Vanderbilt plays Arkansas, especially when it's Stackhouse against Musselman. And I wouldn't be surprised if Vanderbilt wins tonight. Now, can they go on and beat South Carolina? Doubt it. But I mean, South Carolina's a team that I've heard from a lot of people, and I think personally that they match up decently with. So again, who knows? Stackhouse has performed well in these SEC tournaments, Chris. He hasn't made a deep run into the championship, but last year is a good example. The year with Scottie Pippen where they knocked off Alabama. So can that happen? Maybe, maybe not. But I just think fans are in a spot where, and we know this, Chris, fans are in a spot where nothing in the last month or two has felt like it has really mattered to them. That's just kind of where everything's at.
Yeah, 0 wins, 1 win, 2 wins. I don't think it matters to most of the fan base. It might matter to the athletic director and the administration. I just think there was a point of no return on this a while back. I mean, look, there's been one really good month in the Jerry Stackhouse era. That was this time last year. They hit a heater. They won a bunch of close games and against good teams, and that is part of who they are, right? You can't just say that doesn't count. But you also can't say the other 90% of it doesn't count either.
Right.
And even with that 10% of his career that was pretty good, really good, to be honest. It's not enough in the grand scheme of things to change minds with the fan base. And it shouldn't. I mean, just as if Jerry Stackhouse, let's say you flip the win-loss record completely, and they hit a spot last year where they lose a bunch of games in a row, lost a bunch of close games. You wouldn't pick out that part of the record and use that to say, well, he stinks as a coach.
Right.
It's the body of work. The fans know that. I'm not sure the school knows that.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of people, Chris, especially in the last month or so, whether it's fans or people that are familiar with the program, and I just keep hearing that apathetic word where, yeah, you've got people that really do care and want to see this program succeed, but if their voice isn't heard and they feel like it's not being heard, then they start to sort of not care even more. And so that's where we're at. There are also people out there that look at that Florida win and say, man, they're playing well right now. They're improved. They're not, they haven't played their best basketball, but I like how you said the other percentage of this, the other side of this matters too. You lost to Presbyterian, you lost to Western Carolina, you got handled pretty well by San Francisco and Boston College. It just feels like the other side of the Stackhouse era, kind of the dark side of this tenure, is often ignored by a lot of the defendants. And whether it's right or wrong, I just think you've got to look at both sides here and say, okay, yeah, they've played well late in seasons. Their record in March is 17-11 under Stackhouse. But the other side is their record in January is pretty bad. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I saw it in a tweet, and it's honestly the complete opposite of their March record and even worse. So
yeah,
that's just where they're at, Chris. And could they win tonight? Yes, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't know how much it changes it one way or the other.
I'm looking at College Basketball Reference, which has got all the records dating back to 1900, 1901.
Oh, wow.
When W.D. Weatherford was the coach and led the Commodores to a 2-2 record. Since then, let's see, I'm looking for single-digit win seasons before the last decade, which has just been a mess. You got to go back to Bob Polk, his first year, 1947-48. Vanderbilt went 8-14, 4-11 in the league. That's the last single-digit win season Vanderbilt had overall until Bryce Drew's last year, 9-23. And of course, if we're going to speak of injuries and those sorts of things, then that's a hold my beer situation, because everybody remembers what happened with Darius Garland. So Bryce Drew got fired for that. Single-digit win seasons. Jerry Stackhouse went 19-16 in the 2020-21 season. That was, of course, shortened a little bit because of COVID, non-contests and those sorts of things. He went 3-13 that year in the conference, 3-15 the year before. And then the last 2 years, he went 7-11, 11-7 in the conference, which balances out to 500. Unfortunately, the non-conference portion was weak enough where that resume in the league didn't matter, because the non-conference portion was bad and they didn't win enough games.
Right.
This year, 9-22. Here's what I'm getting at. If they don't win tonight, that's going to be 3 seasons of single-digit wins since the late 1940s, and he's going to own 2 of them.
There it is. There it is. And Bryce Drew.
And their non-conference schedule this year was awful. There were plenty of opportunities for wins.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you play teams like USC Upstate. There are a lot of teams at the bottom of their conference, and they're not even, great conferences. And, Chris, even the Bryce Drew year, you had that excuse of Darius Garland. You have the Lee Dort situation. You got the Colin Smith thing this year, but there's no reason in year 5 it should be this bad. And like you said, Chris, I'm in the same boat as you. As you look back at even year 3 of the Stackhouse era, they still had some slip ups early in non-conference. We all know what happened last year. Chris, I think would you argue if they beat Grambling, and who was their other bad non-conference loss? Was it
last
Southern
year?
Miss?
Yeah, which didn't end up being a bad loss. It looked like a bad loss at the time, but Southern Miss won 20-something games, and so it wasn't what we thought it was. But still, that's a game. If you're Vanderbilt, historically, you win.
Yeah, I mean, if you beat Grambling and Southern Miss, I could be wrong here. I would venture to guess that you're in the tournament. If you considering you do everything you did in SEC play, and a lot of people were even arguing they still should have been in the tournament with the way they were playing. And that season last year, we talk about microcosms. That season last year, you got hot in March. You played well late. That was a microcosm of the Stackhouse era. You start the season, whether it's, December, whatever, November, whenever they start these seasons, off pretty badly. But you get hot, and it's like they're not ever fully ready for a season. They get into these seasons, and there was some excitement this year, not as much as last year, because I think last year a lot of people thought they did have a decent roster. This year, just the simple fact of it being year 5, you thought, okay, this should be that step, this should be that tournament year, and the fact that it's gone this bad tells you, I think, a lot about just the culture, and Joey's talked about it. Where's recruiting? How is this affecting recruiting? And I think we're going to learn a lot this offseason, whether it's news of a change or news of new staff members leaving, recruits coming or going, portal. I mean, this is going to be another wild offseason like it has been in most Stack era off seasons.
Billy, I'm looking something up. And by the way, if I'm going to get into is he being fired? Is he not being fired? And the short answer is I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. And I'm skeptical of people who claim to know, but because to be honest, I think the athletic director sent a lot of mixed messages to people. And you got one set of people that say, I know he's gone, and another group of people that say he's coming back. And I don't, unless it is a very well kept secret, I don't think the staff knows either. I don't know how you could be to this point in his tenure and not know. That boggles my mind, which begs the question of motivation to me, which I've kind of been looking into for a while. Is it because the contract's so bad it would be trouble for the athletic director? Is she that loyal to him? Does she really believe some of the stuff that's said, that she really thinks he's a star coach in waiting and just needs resources? Does is she afraid to make the decision? I mean, firing conversations are difficult. I've done that in a previous life. I have fired people who I did not want to fire, or laid people off because of economic conditions. I didn't want to do it. Some close friends, but I had to do it. It's part of the job. I have gotten rid of people that I knew deserved to be fired, uh, without any question. A couple times. It's still no fun. I get it, but
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to know the why, and I think a lot of people would too.
Yeah, and there's been a lot out there, Chris, and we're not going to get everything out there, but I mean, for example, say Vanderbilt, couple weeks ago, lose. Say they go 2-16. Is that a difference? I don't think the record.
I don't think
people
it's
look
a difference.
at. I don't either. So throw that out there. And now at this point, I think you look at the buyout. We've heard different numbers. It kind of started in the 8 range, and then it went up to 14 to 15, and then we even heard upwards of 20, 24. I mean, we've heard a lot, and we've heard a lot of different things, and because of that, you start to look at it and say, okay, this is a mess. I mean, like. Because and there's smoke, like the Mike Vrabel thing with the Titans, Chris, where there's smoke, there's fire. For half the Titans season, it was Carthon versus Vrabel. What's going on? There were things leaked, and it was just ugly. It was a mess, and you couldn't deny it. And there were still people out there, whether it was other reporters that maybe didn't have the whole story, or fans saying, no, Mike Vrabel's not going anywhere. That this is his organization. At the end of the day, there was a ton of smoke, and there was a fire, and it was a mess, and things had to change. I think this is a similar situation. It's not an NFL franchise, of course, but there's been a ton of smoke, Chris. I mean,
yeah,
I've heard from other people, this is the most smoke in a certain situation in a coaching tenure that they've ever seen at Vanderbilt. I mean, you've seen a few of these, Chris. I mean, I'm not sure how this compares to the Derek Mason level smoke. But I mean, there's been a lot. And so I don't think the record matters this year to the administration. Does the buyout matter? I would venture to say yes. But also, what is the relationship inside closed doors between administrators, stack, the coaching staff? Do we know the full story between players and coaches? There's just a lot that we might think we know, and fans might think they know. But in reality, we don't. And that's kind of where it's left off for me. It's just kind of a wait and see. I think the last chance, I know there's a ton of fans, Chris, whether it's on our board or on Twitter. Like our phones have been blowing up, whether it's texts or calls. Yeah. Joey, everybody's. Tonight is probably the last chance, I would guess. I mean, I think you may disagree. I think you might have thought that was Sunday. I think tonight, realistically, like Louisville, for example, they let go of Kenny Payne after last night's loss. Does Michigan, if they lose tonight, do they let go of Howard? I'm not saying those influence Vanderbilt. Now, could they? Maybe. I just think tonight, if there's no move tonight, he's back, and maybe one more day, to make something the next day, make a change the next day, but. Barring a run of the SEC tournament, I don't. Well, not even that. I mean, I just don't think any of it matters anymore. Like, I don't think the results really truly matter anymore, Chris.
Yeah, I don't think they do either. I'm not sure they do either way. I'm not sure they have either way for a while. That's the topic. Yeah. Smoke. I'm not a big believer in smoke. I've learned the hard way. I think there's very few people who know. Maybe in the agent community, but I need more specifics than I've gotten. There's been a lot of stuff out there. I don't know if it means anything. I think the problem, one of Candace's problems with perception, and this is why a lot of people that in the camp of critics, and this is very well sourced. It's sourced over, people who've spent thousands of hours around her. One of the issues she has is people don't know what to take seriously. Because I've talked to multiple people who've said, I will hear one message 1 minute, and when a different crowd is in the room the next minute, it is a different message. And I think that's also a Vanderbilt issue. Drove me crazy with Nick Zeppos. He did the same thing. I think it is a culture issue at Vanderbilt. They cannot – there's some of her – and I get that you have PR issues. I get that you can't just come out and say, I think our coach is a joke and we're going to can his butt as soon as the season's over. I get that there are nuances to that. But the mixed messaging, it's left one camp of people convinced that she's going to make a change, and it's left one camp of people convinced that she's not. And I think ultimately she doesn't like being in that spot. She doesn't like being unpopular. That's part of the territory. And I think messaging a lot of times, the criticism has been, and this has been since before she took office, that messaging is consistent with what people in the room want to hear. I think that's what we're looking at now. That makes it a hard situation to read. I think the other thing, I don't think she wants to fire him. I think she likes him personally. I think they see the world a lot the same way. Again, that was another criticism of her being hired as the AD, was that with her, there were too many things that carried weight that weren't about the winning and losing. So I think this is a litmus test for her.
Oh, yeah.
I really do. Is it? I think if she moves on from him, I think if she doesn't, that makes the case of those things don't matter to her get louder. And I don't know how that's escaped at that point. Now, look, back to what I said about the timing. I don't know how you don't know at this point. It's like the election coming this fall. Either when you vote for president, if you're voting for one of the main two candidates, I don't know how you know, and I'm not making an endorsement here either way, but I don't know how you know, well, I'm trying to decide between this guy or that guy. How could you be undecided? You have an opinion one way or the other that aligns with the politics, the person. They are completely different. I don't know, in the same thing, I don't know how you can be undecided on this matter.
Yeah.
And the thing I said, let me finish and I'll let you go. I'm sorry. I've talked a while now. The thing that I've said going back a while, and I've done research with people in the industry, the thing you do if you're making a coaching change. Now, look, if she's got Chris Mack or somebody locked up, then that's a different conversation. As from a professional level, good for her. That would be I think a terrific hire, and I think that would get a lot of critics off her back. Now, I don't think her staff knows about it, if that's the case, and I think that's poor. I think people deserve to be treated like human beings. They don't need to be thrown about like a yo-yo to the wind. And I don't feel, look, Jerry makes a ton of money. Jerry's not put the time and effort in the job that he needed to. I don't feel sorry for him, but there's assistants on that staff with families. If those people are going to be dismissed, they need to know I need to be getting in line somewhere to get a job elsewhere. And that's not fair to those people. But I just don't know how you could be undecided. And unless you've got something locked up, the responsible move would have been, if you're going to make a change, make the announcement. In fact, I would go further. They should have made an announcement if they're going to move on weeks. They should have made up their mind then. Because, even if he runs the table in the SEC tournament, that doesn't change my mind. We've got a track record of 5 years. Even if he did that, then all of a sudden you've locked yourself in a difficult situation where you need to make a change. And then you've made it harder. I think the record is there. 5 years is plenty. We know it is. I was looking this up. I think they've beaten one NCAA tournament team in the non-conference portion. It's going to be the same. If I think the roster next year has got a chance to be worse. They never play well, even with the better roster in the non-conference portion of the season. The one win they got against an NCAA tournament team, excluding maybe teams that got in as a 15 or 16, was Pitt last year. That was a close game, and Pitt got in as an 11 seed. So you know what it's going to look like. It's going to be the same, slow out of the gate. You would have to work a miracle in the conference season. I don't know how in the world they're going to have a roster that's competitive with Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, those teams. And so given all those facts, the decision should have been made weeks ago. If you're going to move on, you could have spared yourself and your team and your coaches a lot of trouble. You could have saved yourself a situation where the coach is hiding out in his office at senior day, presumably because he doesn't want to get booed. And you could have allowed people to move on. Instead, you're in a spot where you're dragging everybody through it. If they'd made a move Sunday, let's say you want to interview Bucky McMillan. You had a whole week to do it. Now Bucky McMillan has won his conference tournament. He's a hotter commodity, and he's going to spend a lot more time in prep.
Yeah.
This time next week, you're not interviewing Bucky McMillan because he's getting ready for who Sanford is going to be playing, as a 13 seed facing a 4 seed.
Yeah.
You miss your whole window of opportunity with that kind of candidate if he's playing in the NCAA tournament next week. And that's why I do not understand why this is where it is. It's either you do this or you don't or you do that. And if it's moving on, you could have done so much better in allowing people to have peace of mind and moving forward and taken the venom out of it and gotten yourself a head start on the next guy. That is I'm sorry. I'm going to yield the floor back to you after taking it for several minutes.
No, you're totally fine, Chris. I like how you mentioned earlier, what is the reasoning? What is the reasoning going to be? But also, what is the plan going to be? What is the plan of attack going to be if you retain Jerry Stackhouse for year 6? Credit to Bryce Smith on Twitter, wrote for The Hustler, actually did a really good job last year, I want to say. He put a tweet out there talking about West Virginia. They were the hot transfer portal team last year, number 2 ranked portal class in the country. They finished with the same record as Vanderbilt this year, 9-22, 4-14 in the conference, in the Big 12. Culture still matters. Player retention and high school recruiting still matters in this era. This is not the NBA, where you can go out in free agency if you have a lot of money, a lot of cap space, and make a super team. College is not that way, and I don't know if it's ever going to get that far. Ole Miss is doing it in football, but I mean, football's different. Like basketball, those are slightly different in the fact that basketball, that culture and that cohesion still really matters. And Vanderbilt hasn't had that really in the entire tenure. They've only graduated 2 freshmen that have come into only 2 recruits that Stackhouse has gotten to campus have graduated. So that's number 1. Number 2, again, where is the, we'd be hearing a lot about, Miles Studi, if he were to have come back, Jordan Wright, we'd be hearing a lot about, man, this culture is great. I want to come back and play for this coach and this staff. And I think they loved Vanderbilt, but there's a reason Wright and Studi left, and QMB. All 3 of those guys could have been retained. I think that's something that people may not know.
Bill, I want to go a step further. Let me let you finish, then I've got something to add here before I forget it.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, let's say that you are keeping him.
Mm-hmm.
And the staff knows it. And what you're doing right now, he's got 19 staff people, I think.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're tasking several of those people. We're going to go through we're going to go through a database of thousands of players. We're going to find anybody and everybody that might fit, that might hit the portal, and have a play. That's what Nate, I think I've told this story before. Nate Oates a few years ago had scouted a kid at one of the Ivy League schools, because the Ivy League's got rules where you're there 4 years and you can't play a 5th no matter what. So he's like, all right, let's look for kids who might have some eligibility left in the Ivy League, because we know they're not going to have options. And he'd scouted a kid from Penn or somewhere and said, this guy's going to be a perfect fit for our system. Here's why. 12:01 in the morning or whenever the portal opened, right? This kid who probably hadn't thought twice about Alabama is looking up, and he's got a whole sales pitch from Nate Oates about how you fit in. If you're not doing your prep with that level of detail, with all the staff he's got, and he's coming back, I mean, that is that is beyond malpractice, because if
Well,
they're
yeah,
going to have anything resembling a competitive season, the roster is going to have to look a lot different. They're going to have to be ahead of other people on this. And if they're not, I cannot, without a massive roster flip and a massive influx of talent, and that's going to include booster money, which I think you got a lot of people. I think you got about 2 boosters right now that seem to be in on him, and some big money that's saying, no, we're not going to do this.
yeah,
Barring money and barring a level of effort that's not been anywhere close to being there historically, I don't, and even with those things, Billy, you might not be able to do it. But
yeah,
without it, good luck to you.
yeah. And programs like a Tennessee or a North Carolina or an Arizona are going to be a lot more attractive to these players than Vanderbilt, even if they're paying similar or even more money, because
Yeah.
you got to have the track record. There's zero track record behind Jerry Stackhouse. I think last year would have been quite a selling point if they make the tournament, but they didn't. And the straw that broke their back last year was the non-conference, and that's what continues to break their back.
Yeah.
We do have a comment here from Cameron on YouTube, Chris. He says, I think if there is a coaching change, the likely outcome is that this has been mutually decided for a few weeks, and that's why there's been no announcement, just hypothetically speaking.
I don't buy it. I really don't. I know that theory's out there. I might be wrong. I don't believe that. It feels like the mood is still indecision.
Well, that would be competent. I mean, like that, and that's
if you
like
made the decision.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That would be the normal.
I have some more thoughts.
That would be the normal move. Maybe it is the case. Maybe it's not. I honestly tend to side towards you, Chris, that the fan perception and kind of the wishful thinking part of this, Chris, is that the last couple of months have really mattered to the administration. And, they haven't been winning. They got killed in Knoxville. Kentucky came to Memorial and blew them out. Tennessee fans and Kentucky fans took over Memorial. That's not how administrators, especially at Vanderbilt, think. And almost only, especially in the SEC, like that, the idea that maybe for fans, it's been a hot last couple of months and there's been, some smoke, but in terms of the administration and even with this coaching staff, they could be sitting here going, I don't know what y'all are saying. What's
Billy,
going on?
The way this has always worked, the school knows just exactly when to throw out a little cookie. Like, we're sitting here wandering in the wilderness and we got no food, but I'm just going to tease you a little bit that there might be this nice thing around but you got to be patient. You can't wait, and we can't talk about it right now. The school has always known how to do that. I mean, I saw that game played with football stadiums for a decade. By the way, we still got massive holes in the ground, and that thing is going nowhere in a hurry. That's another subject. But the school always knows how to do just enough to keep you hopeful. But let's unpack that for a minute, okay? Let's say that this is some 3D chess move where this has all been decided upon and it's a super well-kept secret that only Candace and Stack know about, and that's kind of been floated. Well, I think that's discourteous and disrespectful to your staff. Again, for the reasons I said, you got families, you got things to move on to. That's number one. Number two, who does it? Why does that make any sense? Why does that make any sense? You're going to have a vacancy, but you're keeping it a secret? Really? I mean, how does that help your candidate pool? That's number one. Number two, who does that benefit on the staff? Does that benefit? I mean, like, if they had come out and said a month ago, hey, look, this isn't working. We know it. We know it's time to move on. What happens at player introductions, Billy? Do you think Stackhouse is getting booed every time? Do you think the athletic director's having to run and hide and not show her face and avoid conversations? Or does that take the venom and the sting out of it? Does that take the pressure off? Okay, we know the basketball is going to be bad or mediocre, but everybody knows this is coming to an end. That's why that doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
You would not do that in that circumstance if you're a normal person. If you've made the decision and you're moving on, you'd say, hey, guys, let's do this. That way people don't have to say, hey, you know what? I got tickets. I know people that said, I'm selling my tickets to Tennessee fans and Kentucky fans because it's all I got left. And I'm never a person that's done that. They tell me, but it's all I've got. I feel like we need more blue or more orange at the gym, and we need our team to get run out of the building. That's the spot that you're putting people in if you make that decision. You could have said, hey, this isn't working. He's not coming back. Come support our team, support our seniors. Instead, what you end up with is a spectacle every game where the head coach gets booed, where he's hiding out in his office during senior day. I mean, come on. You recruited these kids. They have families. They deserve a photo op with you in the picture, with you in your jersey and the athletic director. Instead, neither of them are on the floor. You got one in his office. You got one hiding in a corridor somewhere because they don't want to get booed. When he does get introduced before the game, they shoot off the steam cannon right then so nobody hears the boos. Why would you do that? Why in your right mind would you do any of that? That's why I don't buy it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And the last thing I'll say, Chris, because I know we got baseball and some mailbag to get to. Last thing I'll say is I'm very intrigued by the potential blowback. I think we both think it'll get pretty ugly, whether it's locally, regionally, even nationally. I'm sure some people will come out against it. But what does that matter? Does the blowback matter? Does how it's received matter? We'll see. I don't personally think so, because in that building I think they kind of block themselves in. But at the end of the day, Chris, the next month or so, if the announcement is made that Jerry Stackhouse is retained, it could get ugly. Now, does it get bad enough? And are there enough voices out there? We'll see. But again, that's the state of affairs, and I'm very intrigued about this offseason because how many players leave, and that was kind of the straw that broke Stephanie White's back, the lack of player retention and players leaving. Does that happen?
At that point, Billy, it's too late. It's too late. You might as well keep him for another season or hire a Paul Hewitt to fill the gap. Look, if I know the motivation, I've got a much better – like, does Kirkland Hall say, hey, we like this guy? He suits our politics. He suits a lot of things, and we're keeping him. And by the way, we don't want to pay $15 million or whatever it is. If that's your motivation, we got the answer. Mm-hmm. Are you trying to please that crowd and maybe keep yourself out of trouble, or are you trying to win games and please the fans? And that's a much different answer. I think if we know where the motivation is and what's the strongest pull in the tug of war, it's a lot easier to get the answer. And I just don't know what that is this morning.
Yeah. Arkansas, 6.5-point favorite tonight. That game's supposed to tip off at 6, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, 6:00 tonight. So that'll be interesting. We'll see. Again, does something come out tonight? Maybe, maybe not. But at this point, let's not act like these results have really, truly mattered a whole lot. And so that's where it's at. We'll try to get to the mailbag or talk a little baseball, Chris.
Yeah, why don't you pull up the mailbag? We'll talk baseball. I was at the Indiana game last night. The bats continue. Now, I will say this. A lot of people have talked about the bats. And I do think the hitting's been encouraging. I think of the offense, the defense, and the pitching, those three phases of the game, that's been the most consistently strong. However, I will tell you this. Look around the country at the run numbers being scored. They are crazy. So you've got to take that into account. And by the way, that goes for the pitching too. The pitching, I think, has been a little disappointing, and I get that. But it's also that we are in an era where the offense is just off the charts.
Yeah.
So,
and that's kind of where the mailbag starts. And it is brought to you by.
Yeah. But before you get into that, the other thing too, the Dukanich injury, I don't know does that come up in the mailbag? Okay. Then we'll get to that then.
I don't think it does, but I'm sure we can tie
Well,
that
then,
into questions.
while you're getting the mailbag ready, I will address that for a minute. Andrew Dukanich left the game last night. I did not see what happened. I hadn't seen I think they said he was shaking his, looked like some forearm discomfort, something along those lines. If it's forearm discomfort, I would be worried. Tim Corbin didn't give much of a comment on it, but that is a precursor to a UCL injury, and that means surgery, and that's not good. That's a lot of ifs to get to a bad if. I don't know if that's how it stands, but I think that's what people were concerned about last night.
Yeah, and Dukanich, Chris, I mean, we talked about him potentially being that third guy, or kind of that Saturday guy in between Holton and Futrell. With Cunningham, the way he's pitched, I would honestly expect Cunningham to pitch this weekend against Auburn, potentially in that Saturday role. But now with Dukanich out, we don't know how long, but it's kind of you don't want that to happen again to too many other guys. Like that's what really hurt this team last year. And if this is serious, I don't think it'll kill them. But we may be looking back at, say this team loses in a regional again, man, they didn't have Dukanich. That whether he's the third or the fourth guy that they expected. Now, again, the bats have really taken a lot of the kind of the concerns away from me, because when you can hit like Vanderbilt has so far, that's kind of a weapon in your backpack, in your back pocket. You can kind of pull out, say you're down 8-3 in the seventh, you kind of, string some runs together, and whether you give up runs or not, you have that capability, and a lot of SEC teams do. Tennessee, A&M, like you mentioned earlier. So I think the bats, for me at least, have kind of limited any of the bullpen concerns, because ironically, Chris, the bullpen we thought coming into the season was going to be lights out and dominant, but it's kind of been the other way around. The bats have really stepped up and played well, and the bullpen has kind of been what has hurt this team, and some defense at times too, which I was not on my bingo card really for any season under Tim Corbin. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But that Dukanich, definitely something to track.
Yeah, I was alarmed. I'm keeping a scorecard, updating the board, and so I didn't see him, the incident where whatever tipped off the dugout, but that was a quick response. I mean, he's 0-2 on a hitter, and I look up, and I mean, the last pitch hadn't been 6 or 7 seconds in the rearview mirror, and you got a trainer already on the green walking out there.
Yeah,
and the rapidness of that was a little startling. It was almost like they saw something, they knew immediately, hey, look out. There was no conversation of significance. There was no, hey, let's check out your arm. They didn't touch him. They didn't ask him. They just said, you're out of here.
Wow. Yeah, that's especially with Dukanich, and he's still young. You just hate it that, I think I heard you maybe was on the board or something. He could have pitched his last pitch at Vanderbilt. We don't know. I mean, we don't know. And you hate that for him. He's got a ton of talent. And you just hope for his sake this isn't anything more serious.
Are we ready for the mailbag?
Let's do it.
While you get that ready, let me do our reads here. Mailbag presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one's been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. The guest line presented by John Levin, the Maynard Nexus Government Contracts Group. Maynard Nexus advises government contractors on all aspects of needs with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. Thank you to both of those firms for sponsoring what we do here. And now let's get to the mailbag.
Let's do it. We're actually going to start with baseball this year. I think it's a pretty good question here from Musa on the board. What has been the biggest positive for each of you so far in baseball season? I'll start, Chris. Again, I think we touched on it. Both of us did. Offensively. I mean, it's like I mentioned, it's crazy. We're talking about, man, this Vanderbilt offense. How about these bats? And again, they haven't been, I don't know where they rank nationally or even in the SEC, Chris. I'm sure you've got those, but they're not bottom half. I would venture to guess. I mean, I could be wrong there, but I mean, this team, batting average wise, you've got 4 guys hitting above 300. The home run numbers aren't tremendous, but 22 at this point before SEC play even starts, I think is encouraging. Matthew Polk has really come in. He's hitting above 300. He's only got, 30 at bats. So I think he has kind of played his way into the lineup potentially, and he's hit the ball really well. So the depth, not just those first 9, but the depth. You've got a guy like Polk you can bring up off the bench. Humphrey, who I think has been really impressive at the plate. Poteet starting to come on late. Braden Holcomb, who we haven't seen a ton of recently as of late. Even Matt Ossenfort. You've got even 2 guys that are hurt right now, Bulger and Maldonado. And those aren't even any of the starters. You got R.J. Austin hitting 361, Espinal 355, Kojal 344, Lanive 333. Espinal's really starting to show some power. He's got 4 home runs on the year. You got a couple of guys with 3, Polk and Lanive. So RBI numbers are going up. I just think, yes, it's non-conference, but it's not like this has been chopped liver in the non-conference, Chris. You've played Indiana, who, that's not, MTSU. That's a Big Ten team that is traditionally decent, at least. They played Vanderbilt in that regional. You've played some Gonzaga, I thought was pesky, and Corbin complimented them. FAU, you go out in Houston and play those teams. And I think that's when for me, Chris, when it kind of clicked with this offense and they sort of woke up, felt like they played with a chip on their shoulder in Houston. And then Illinois State this past weekend, offensively, wasn't blow you away, but it was okay. This is sufficient. And if you can just figure out that bullpen, figure out where you're going to place these pitchers, this team can be really dangerous. We've said that. And so for me, Chris, it's offensively. The bats, I think you would agree, but starting pitching, you could argue too. These last 4 guys, J.D. Thompson, Holton, Futrell, Cunningham. I mean, does J.D. Thompson get into the weekend rotation? That could be another question to ask. Probably not till later in the season, but.
Yeah, I think the offense coming into this season, we said, is this they got a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Are they good guys, like they could take a step up or 2 steps from being just okay or respectable to being good hitters? Or are they guys that stagnate and they just got a lineup of 9 guys and you're like, I don't know that I'm scared of any of these guys? It feels like everybody pretty much took a step up for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got a situation where you got Maldonado out, you got Bulger out. Those were 2 everyday guys, and you still got a guy like Jacob Humphrey who can't crack the everyday lineup. So the depth, I didn't even notice Cam Kojal sat out last night. So they can let Poteet catch and Espinal DH. Kojal's been on fire lately. So, you saw Holcomb been in the deep freeze for 2.5 weeks. He got an at bat last night. The depth and the ability to step up and take it to a different level, I think, has been everything that you hope for. And additionally, I'm keeping an eye out for this, Billy. This is the day and age where it's like slow pitch softball. You just got a lot of bombs and stuff like that. They play a different style. Do they hit some home runs? Yes. Are they going to be middle at the pack in the SEC at best in home runs? Yes, they are. But I wonder, with as much emphasis on power, and you see some teams that don't run at all.
Yeah.
Well, when you don't run, that's what your guys are practicing against. Guys that don't take extra bases, they don't steal bases, they don't do the kinds of things that Vanderbilt does to put pressure on the defense. And when you're not working on that all the time, it's almost like facing a triple option team. It's not to that degree, but you see those teams give bigger teams some trouble sometimes because they're not used to seeing it. I think there's a little bit of that element in play. You got Vanderbilt and Kentucky out there doing something a little different than the rest of the world. And I think they're going to run into some games in the SEC where it's tight, and you might look up and say, hey, the difference was they stole 6 or 7 bases tonight.
Yes.
Took a first to third on a single to to left field or something because the guy wasn't paying attention. I do think style-wise, they do some things that could be problematic given the way the game is played.
Yeah, there aren't many teams in the SEC doing it like Vanderbilt. I'd probably say Kentucky. Auburn at times, Chris, they've got a ton of power. Of course, we know about their power, but Auburn at times under Butch Thompson has been a team like that. Really excited for this weekend, though. Vanderbilt and Auburn. I think Tennessee goes to Alabama. So there's some series where you'll kind of sit here and say, okay, this could be an interesting early weeding out weekend because you go through non-conference play and then you get to SEC play. You got to wake up. So we'll see what happens this weekend. Let's see here. I think this is a really good one. Baseball Bros. If you could sit down with Candace Story-Lee and ask her 2 questions apiece, what would they be? Man, I made sure I forgot to think about this one. I made sure to tell myself last night when I saw this to really think about it. Let's see here. Number one, I think we talked about it earlier. Number one, what is your plan for the men's basketball program? Because of this season, it's year 5. We know what's happened. What is your plan of attack? That would be number one for me. Number two, man, this is tough. That's the biggest one, Chris. I don't know if I have another one that is as impactful. I'll go to you and think about my second.
I think my question would be, look, she wanted this job for a long time. She wanted the prestige that came with it. She wanted to be the first African-American female AD. She put a lot of time in at Vanderbilt. She loves her school. I do not question her for any of those things. But I think the question I have is, are you more interested in the job as a title? Or do you want because it feels like she's kind of clamored for respect of her peers. I'm this person in the world of these people, and I've beaten the odds. Okay. If you want the respect that comes with that, it's got to be less about the nameplate on your wall or your desk. And do you do things that are consistent with the way other Power 5 ADs do them? Because if that's the world you want in, you want the respect and things that come with that, then the actions have to match. And I think that's really the only question I have about anything.
Yeah.
Is how willing are you there to go there? And are you willing to do it to the point to where you piss campus off at times in order to get your athletic programs there? Because I think that's part of it too.
Right. Yeah. Will you do what it takes? Will you do whatever it takes? I think that would be another one I have. But good question, though. Let's see. Dylan VU32, are you hearing anything about basketball transfers in or out? Man, again, don't take my word for this. I think Van Allen Lubin is a guy to watch. He will be pursued. Ezra Magnon is out of eligibility. Tyron Lawrence is an interesting case. He may have some suitors, but he's still getting paid quite handsomely from Vanderbilt. So I don't know if a school comes and says, hey, we'll match or pay more. I kind of doubt it. So I think Tyron may even end up coming back, or just if he wants to just leave and go try to play overseas or G League, or I don't know. But Van Allen Lubin would be a guy to watch. I think potentially Jason Rivera Torres, because I do think he'll have suitors as well. I do know FAU was between Vandy and FAU originally. And I have heard some buzz there. I wouldn't worry too much about Isaiah West. He's a local kid. I think he likes playing at Vanderbilt. His, family's in town, able to go to games. Other than that, Chris, I don't know. I think there obviously will be, because every year there's at least what's the minimum amount of transfers they've had under Stackhouse in an offseason? It's got to be, they've got it. It feels like they've averaged 5, every offseason. So there's going to be some. I would kind of put Van Allen Lubin and Rivera Torres up there as the kind of the top 2 that I think could go.
Yeah, look, again, if you're waiting for that as an answer to what do you do with the coaching
Yeah.
change and it goes badly, you've really screwed yourselves. Look, even before the portal, this was always a topic. I hear so and so's leaving and so and so's unhappy and they want to get out of here, and sometimes it materialized and sometimes it didn't. That was pre-portal.
Mm-hmm.
So now in the chaos, I don't even. I mean, again, the program's got much bigger issues than that.
Yeah.
You don't make a. You shouldn't be making a decision on whether you have 2 guys transfer out or 6 guys transfer out, but
Yeah.
who knows?
VU Wars. What does the current recruiting class look like, and does it have any shot of moving the needle competition-wise for Vanderbilt in the SEC? To answer that, I don't think it does. They've got Tyler Tanner, who actually just won Mr. Basketball. He's a talented kid. He's no Darius Garland, but he's a good player, and I think he's an SEC level player. Other than that, you've got a Jamie Vinson kid who, again, is more of a project, kind of like a guy like an Ejike Obine who they had under Stallings, and then into Bryce Drew. And, he's 6'11", 210, so he's got the body, but, I don't think he's an immediate impact guy. Karis Bilal's another guy kind of like Tyler Tanner, not the biggest guard, but, he's a good player, 6'2", 180 pounds. They got him out of Atlanta. Wasn't super highly recruited, but nobody, Chris, that you look at and you go, wow, this staff is starting to recruit. And I'm trying to look up where they rank nationally. I don't think it's anything to write home about. I mean, I think I saw last time maybe in the 40s or 50s, not even 40s, probably. I think it's more so in the 50s.
His highest rated recruiting class, the one that got everybody excited, was a complete and total bust.
Yeah, I mean, Lee Dort, you saw what happened to him.
The Shelby and Dort class. Yeah, I don't put look, they don't have enough guys. They don't have enough players.
Yeah.
Even though those guys are all better than we think, there's not enough foundation of a roster for them to be difference makers, I don't think.
And then,
in terms of moving the whole win-loss record.
Mm-hmm. And the second part of this question, what's the word on basketball NIL? Anything at all? Obviously, we've heard things. There's been some rumors that, Mark Cuban could potentially be involved, owner of the Mavericks, and Stackhouse played for the Mavericks. It was drafted by the Mavericks, actually. I don't know if there's – that would be my best guess, that there's something there. I don't know if you've heard anything else, Chris, on NIL, but you talked about it earlier. There's donors out there that are against the leader of this program. I'm not saying there won't be any money for NIL, but it'll be interesting what that war chest potentially looks like. Not sure we'll ever get an official number, but NIL, you got to have something. And even if they do have a lot of money, it doesn't mean a ton changes.
Yeah, I think he's got about 2 donors right now of any significance. You got some people that are in the mega donor realm that have said, I'm going to sit this out as long as he's the coach. I don't know about the Cuban scenario. That's been speculated. I've not heard that specifically. I do think that there's kind of an out-of-the-box how do I say this? Well, I'll just put it this way. I think I got some info and confidence that it is a potential explanation for how they can raise a war chest that's plausible, and that's about as far as I can go. Is it going to matter? You're going to have to buck 5 years of history to tell me that it does.
Okay, Bex 4VU. Here's an interesting one, Chris, and you're probably better equipped to answer this than I am. Who will be the next baseball alum to make an MLB roster? You've got guys, and he listed some guys by year in 2020. Mason Hickman, Jake Eater, Tyler Brown, Austin Martin is a good candidate. From 2021, Rocker, Leiter, Luke Murphy, CJ Rodriguez. 22, Keegan and Jones. Spencer Jones is a guy that would be high on my list. From last year, Enrique Bradfield will be one of the guys, but I still think he's probably at least a year away. Yeah. Leiter has looked really good, Chris. Rocker has been banged up. He got hurt again.
Yeah.
And so,
Again?
well, I mean, didn't he get hurt?
Uh,
Not super recently, but I know
he had surgery and missed a year. I have to be honest, I have not dug in on any of those guys. The one I keep wondering, Lighter kind of dropped out of elite prospect status, but that kid is so talented. I thought
yeah,
that he was, as I watched him, maybe the most talented kid I've seen at Vanderbilt. So I
yeah.
would, I think I would kind of bet on a rebound. I could be wrong. Austin Martin's, for where he was picked, and I
That would
think
be
he's
my
got to be
guess.
close to the point. You kind of got to give him a chance to see what they've got and what they don't. Spencer
Yeah,
Jones hit that 470-foot home run,
yeah,
but I don't know what the outfield DH situation is in New York. So a lot of that's going to depend on who's around those guys, and especially if it's American League. I'm just not as I'm an NL
yeah.
guy. I'm not as locked in, and a lot of those guys are AL guys.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Chris, it's crazy. Those guys were all really good players, and they're still. I mean, Martin,
Yeah,
2020, he was a 2020 guy, and he's still. I mean,
yeah.
that's how hard it is. Let's see here. Oh, here's a good one. Go Doors 94. How do we match up against Auburn? And predictions for overall conference record. Chris, I'll kind of toss it to you with Auburn. And you actually showed me this. You've done a ton of research on really every SEC team. Auburn's good. They mash the
Yeah.
baseball. And I mean, you were showing me their home run numbers, I think, comparing last year to this year and some of the transfers they got and guys they brought back. This is a team that really hits the baseball.
Yeah, their numbers productivity wise on offense are a lot like Vanderbilt's. One thing they do is they take a lot of walks. So I think your umpiring could be an important thing in this. Auburn has hit 35 home runs. That's more than Vanderbilt. I wasn't sure about that. They've got Cooper McMurray, Ike Irish are real power threats. They've got Bobby Pierce, who's been there forever, who's having a nice year. Chris Stanfield's an old guy. They've got an older, deeper lineup. So I think you've got to watch the free passes. You don't want to walk two guys and give up a 3-run bomb. That's a lot of how the game is played these days. Now they're pitching. I think it's quality. I don't think they have the depth of talent that Vanderbilt does at the top. But they've been making it work so far. It put up decent numbers. So I think it's an interesting matchup. I think you have to give Vanderbilt a little bit of an edge, and particularly at home. But it's certainly one that's losable.
Yeah, no, it is. Auburn's never really easy. They haven't been easy for a while.
No.
Even back when they had Josh Donaldson. So Auburn will not be easy. Overall conference record, it's hard to say. I don't know. What were they last year, Chris, in conference? Let's see.
18-12?
18-12. Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to say. I might even go something like if worst case scenario, I think is if you're around 500, 15, 15, 16, 14. I could be totally wrong there. Maybe it's a lot worse than that. Best case, I think this team could be at close to 20 wins. Like all things go right, Holton is shut down Friday guy. Futrell is hard to piss. Nice change of pace. Hard to pitch. Nice change of pace guy.
That's interesting analysis there, Billy.
Yeah. Tough guy to face on a Sunday, for SEC teams. And then you throw Cunningham in there on Saturday. Pitchers are dominating. Bats are hitting the ball well, finding contact. I think best case scenario here, this team could get close to 20 wins. I'll lean on the side of closer to 16 and 14, 17, 13 type, though, just from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I'm going to go I'd probably set the over-under on conference wins, presuming they play all of them, 16.5, 17. I mean, they got some tough road trips. They got to go to Baton Rouge. They got to go to A&M. They got to go to Georgia, which is hitting home runs like there's no tomorrow. They got to go to South Carolina. Won't be easy. Now, they do avoid Arkansas, which I think is best team in the conference. They avoid Alabama, which I think is good. They avoid Ole Miss, which I don't think is bad, but it's not one of the better teams in the league. So,
yeah,
home series with Tennessee, Florida. But, I mean, you look at everybody's schedule, and nobody's going, oh, my goodness, this is a cakewalk. So, they're all right there in the same boat. I think it's critical. I think they need to get out of the next two weekends no worse than 3-3 sweep Missouri here to get to 6-3, and then brace for what's ahead, which is LSU, A&M, Florida, back to back to back, with 2 of those on the road. And if you get to 4-2, then I think you got to really be feeling good after the first 2 weekends.
Yeah. All right. Poor Vandy fans 615. Any word on the injuries and possible return times for Bulger and Maldonado? Assuming Maldonado returns to first base and how well he's hitting, will R.J. Austin move back to the outfield and split time? We'll start there with Bulger and Maldonado, Chris. Corbin gave an update on at least Bulger last night, didn't he?
He did. He said he was taking batting practice. I'd have to go back and listen to it. You can find it on our YouTube channel, but it sounded like he's maybe close. Although hamstrings can just flare up at any time, so you never know. Yeah. Maldonado didn't sound super close to me, but I could have misread that.
Yeah. On the R.J. Austin thing, that is going to be interesting. I think he's played really well at first. He's showed his versatility, reminding me of a guy like an athletic first baseman, like a Trey Morgan, a little bit at LSU, Chris, where he may not be a prototypical first baseman, but R.J. Austin has played, I think, phenomenally well at first base. So that will be interesting to track. That all depends on Maldonado, though, and his health. Would Bulger go back to left field? It's interesting. I think you brought it up on one of the podcasts, maybe. Troy Leneve has been really good, or maybe you asked Corbin about it.
Yeah, I did.
He's been really good in left field.
Leneve looks a lot more natural out there in left than Bulger does to me, and that is a tricky place to play because you've got a wall that's rounded, you got different heights, you got a little bit of a cutout there where it's angled, you got all kinds of stuff out there to deal with. And if you're not comfortable, it can eat you up in a hurry. Leneve looks a little bit more comfortable out there. I don't know what to do with Jack Bulger when he gets back because everybody's hit. Seems to me like he's more suited to the DH role, but that's Cam Kozel. He's talked about wanting to play in the field. I don't know if Jack can play much right. I don't really remember that. Now you got Matt Polk out and right. You got Humphrey who can play right.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do when everybody gets back and healthy. But the way it usually resolves is we're talking about somebody. What'll happen is probably somebody else will get banged up that we're not even talking about. I'm not going to throw a name out there, but I mean, just pick anybody in the lineup, and then, well, okay, now that we're doing the left side of the infield is where you run into some issues.
Yeah.
If Diaz or Vastine get hurt, or Espinal for that matter, then it's a little different. But everywhere else, I mean, let's say you decided Jaden Davis wasn't. You slide Kozel into second, but you could put Austin back at second. Austin, to me, is starting to look more comfortable at first. I feel like his mistakes have been more along the lines of instinctive ones about when to go grab the ball or when to cover the bag or those sorts of things, and those get better over time. So I have no idea. I don't even know how I'd begin to make a prediction.
Yeah. Let's see here. I think that might be it, Chris. We had a question about when is Stackhouse going to do a podcast with you. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
No. Yeah, look. This is just so unfortunate.
It is, and I keep saying that, and I'll kind of leave it here. It's ultimately just sad. I feel bad for donors and alums that really care. One of them we both know, George Plaster, who's very well connected with those former players like a Matt Freege or Booker, Purdue, Maddox. And there's a lot of guys that want to care and want this to be back to what Memorial Gym you knew it as growing up, Chris. And like what I know Memorial Gym as isn't even close to what you do and Luke does. And it's there and it's capable. You just need the right guy. And like you said, it's unfortunate. It's sad. We'll see. Does something happen tonight? Does something happen in the morning? I think these are kind of the last gasp couple days here because if nothing happens here in the next couple of days, nothing's going to happen. So that's where I'll leave it.
Well, there are two things that I think are sad, and they're a reflection on leadership. And I think one of them is the athletics programs, baseball accepted, had just been for the better part of the last 5-6 years. Everything over there, the stories that get people's attention and get them talking on and listening to podcasts, and they're not sports stories. They're soap opera stories. School's got to get away. You got to get out of the soap opera business and get into the winning games business. And it feels like it's been a while other than baseball, which is one of the reasons I love covering baseball. I got into this business to cover sports. I feel like that's my respite between about mid-February and whenever it runs out. And I enjoy it because I get that over here, and everything else has been something else. Number two, they got a unity problem. I think most of the fans and a lot of former players feel alienated. I feel like there's a feeling that there's a special class of people that are close to the athletic department that get preference, that get treated one way, and then there's everybody else to fend for themselves. And those are the two things that Vanderbilt has got to address. And you can get mad at me for being a critic, but tell me based on the evidence where I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got in the mailbag, Chris.
Let's get out of here.
Let's do it.
All right, we'll be at the game tonight. We'll be covering the press conference. Go to VandySports.com, $9.99 a month, $99 a year. Subscribing there helps us out. Support our sponsors. Those people help us out, particularly the good folks at Anchor Impact. That is how you make the engines of winning run. For Billy Derrick, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching, listening. This is the Vandy Sports Podcast.